Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is a rainy and gray Wednesday morning here in the city of Philadelphia. Today on the Coffee Break Chat, vaccine hesitancy, or how I learned to love the bomb. Just a little joke subtitle there for those that know film. Masks, public events, critical race theory. And we're going to be starting with our special guests, Julie Beth and Emily Schuman, with the film Curious, Think Outside the Pipeline. And let me bring them up on screen. There they are. Welcome. Welcome to the Coffee Break Chat. I'm your host, James Jackson, executive producer, Light Thief Productions, he, they pronouns. Emily, please introduce yourself, your pronouns, and what it is you do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Schuman. I use she, her pronouns, and I do a multitude of things here in Philadelphia. I make props and small objects like the Pipeline Curious show you're about to learn about. I'm also a performer and a musician, and I'm currently a contact tracer in the state of Pennsylvania.
Awesome. And Julie, if you would introduce yourself and what it is you do and your pronouns.
Yep, my name is Julie. I use they, them pronouns, and I am part of Ants on a Log. We play socially conscious music for kids and families, and we just produced Curious, Think Outside the Pipeline, the movie version with Emily.
Awesome. So tell us about Ants on a Log.
Sure. So we are usually playing concerts, and this was a sort of larger production that we decided to do where we wanted to make a musical. So we were very inspired by Philly Thrive. They were doing some great community-based work and, trying to shut down this oil refinery in Philadelphia, which ended up as a victorious win. And so we decided to make a musical about that and about sort of the youth-powered climate movement going on. And we had a great time making this musical. We put out the soundtrack to it. And there's all sorts of fun people on here. Kathy O'Connell from WXPN plays the mom, and also lots of other fun cameos. And then we were going to tour the show. My bandmate and I, Anya Rose, wrote all that and did all of that. And then we were going to tour the show, but then Anya couldn't tour. So we brought in Emily, and Emily and I were going to tour the show. And then COVID hit. So they said, well, can you do something virtually? And I didn't know what that could be, but we ended up making a movie, and Emily is an amazing prop master and artist and made all the puppets and art, and it ended up being this movie. So this is our latest project, and it's been going on in different iterations. But we also do all sorts of other things. I'll just say one more highlight from Ants on a Log this year has been I released the Trans and Non-Binary Kids Mix, which was a compilation of songs all by artists all over the gender map, trans, non-binary folks, cis allies, all in support of trans and non-binary youth. And it's a super fun, joyful, celebratory, danceable mix. It's free on Bandcamp, or go to our website. And these projects are just, our way of using music to support all the social justice work that needs to be done.
Awesome. And where can folks see and or hear and or watch the movie version?
Yeah, you can bring the movie to your community or to your school in a few different ways. You can license the movie, or you can get the script and the kids can perform the show. It just ended, there was a run at Philly Theater Week, and the rest of that information, when it's going to play next, and how to bring it to your community or how to perform it with your students, is at antsonalogmusic.com.
Awesome. Emily, what was it like to jump into the middle of a project? And I've worked with you on the beginning of some projects, and I've worked with you in the middle, excuse me, in the middle of a project. Pardon,
It
I'm a
was
little phlegm this morning.
It was awesome. I feel like I've been following Julie and Anton Alag since the beginning, I feel like, of Curious. And I was able to see Curious, in the first iteration as a fringe show. And I was so excited to be brought on to help create this virtual version, which is really, really fun. Basically, we had a lot of meetings about going through the entire script and trying to figure out, okay, how can we even make this a film? And basically it ended up being lots of really fun DIY, like really easy to make little paper props that were 2D. And I think it can be helpful for kids to see because they can make this kind of stuff themselves. Like I used really simple watercolors, really simple line drawing kind of stuff. And then I made puppets out of socks. So it was also, I think, like a really great way to showcase how you can make this kind of art super, super easily by yourself. And hopefully that's what this show does.
Awesome. I mean, feel free to engage us with some puppetry. We're open to all kinds of engagement, so feel free to do that. Hang on one second, I just need to turn on my closed captioning because sometimes I lose my audio in the studio. Anyway, so what do you have up next, and what are you working on right now that you want us to be aware of?
I bet we both have different answers to that. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I in my side part-time life as well, I'm also an associate artist with Delaware Shakespeare, and we've been doing a lot of really interesting work, really exciting work, kind of figuring out new virtual programming. We've also released some really exciting anti-racism documents about how the company can move forward in being actively anti-racist. And we have a fundraiser actually coming up this Friday. So if you want to check out more information about Delaware Shakespeare, that you can find that information at delshakes.org.
Lately, I have a couple projects brewing. One is I released a song and discussion guide. It's called Had to Stand Up. And it's about a white kid who intervenes in a like a racist interaction on the playground. And it's about sort of like the body and the sort of what happens in your body. Your legs get shaky, your heart races, that kind of thing. So having kids being able to acknowledge what that feels like in their body in order for them to take action and intervene. And I partnered with a anti-racism/inclusion education specialist. She's a professor. Her name is Mara Sapan-Shevin, and she helped me make this discussion guide so that educators can use this song to help kids tackle all of those concepts through music. And I'm really excited to see how educators use it. We actually have something on our website that says, like, if you're using this resource, write to us and let us know how you use it, because we want to all learn from each other. How can white people continue standing up, and how can we teach our children to do those things? What works in the classroom, what works as parents. So that's one project. And then the response about the trans and non-binary kids mix that I just mentioned was so huge. Someone from the founder of Queer Kid Stuff reached out to me. Queer Kid Stuff is this really cool, like multimedia blog and video series and all sorts of great resources for teaching kids about not only queerness, but privilege and justice and anti-racism and all sorts of concepts for kids. So they reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to do another album of music that is like specifically queer and trans, non-binary focused with more words that we need to be putting in songs for kids and families to be singing along to. And my favorite that we're working on right now is a song about non-binary names of parents. So it's kind of a lullaby, and instead of using mommy and daddy, we're hearing non-binary parent names. So I think what I'm working on in like sort of thematically is this thing where we name the words, you know, instead of being like, kids music is like, we love everybody, sunshine and rainbows, you know, we're actually using the words that are the vocabulary of marginalized communities. We want to actually have those words in our vernacular and teaching our kids those kind of things. So I just got a grant, I'm so grateful, from the Leeway Foundation to start that project.
That's awesome. And it's what I mean, I haven't gotten a chance to jump in just yet, but all of these projects are awesome. I'm personally highly about anti-racism in production, and you know, it's one of the goals of our company is to involve anti-racism and anti-racist work in our company's work. It's interesting that you mention this sort of work today, because a big thing happening in social media and in politics and media in general right now is a pushback on critical race theory being involved in policy making and education in any sort of way. It's a strange pushback to me, because a lot of people that seem to be doing this pushback don't seem to understand the words critical race theory. And I'm just curious if critical race theory played any part in what you're thinking about doing with anti-racism work and you know, socially just work in production and in media.
Wow, what a large question. I mean,
I like those.
Yeah. Well, I will say that the story of Philly Thrive was very inspiring. The way that they are doing work around environmental justice, you know, is so focused on the Black and brown people who are being much more affected by the oil refinery and the pollutants that are going on, you know, even at the site now that it's closed down. They're working really hard to sort of bring in all of the above, and I think, you know, all the above of what you're mentioning. I just think it's really important to be like, we need these like academic, you know, institutions having these conversations, but we also just need to be doing the like kind of teach-ins and hearing from the residents that Philly Thrive is promoting. You know, if you go on their website, they're like, yesterday they did a talk back about residents saying how gentrification and how the refinery are affecting their lives. And I don't know, I just kind of think like that's the most important. And hopefully that will continue to inform my work. And just as a white person, I'm just like, you know, hopefully I'm playing into those conversations in a meaningful way, and I'm following the lead of people of color right now. Emily, you got to go, huh?
So sadly, I have to go.
What do you think about critical race theory? I have to leave. I'm just kidding.
Emily is quite aware of critical race theory, and we'll let her off the hook because she did say at the beginning of the interview that she would have to go at quarter after. Do you have any?
I'm so
words?
excited. I will say I'm so excited to tune in and listen to the rest of this conversation after work today.
I want to say that, Emily, like, you and I, as white people making this work, we had a lot of conversations about race and like how this would play out, you know, and sometimes it manifested in like, are we even going to use like white socks for the
That was a big part. We really didn't want to be specific at all about the race of these puppet characters, and definitely took that into account when making these fun puppets.
Unrelated to critical race, or maybe related, but anyway, thank you, Emily, for just, you know, doing that with me.
Of course. James, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah,
I'm
no
very
worries.
excited to hear the rest of the coffee chat.
Yeah, and come back anytime, especially if you want to talk more about any of this stuff. We can talk I've talked for a full hour myself about these topics, so feel free to jump back on anytime you have time.
I would love to.
Great. Awesome. I'm also going to welcome to the chat Dr. Ardencia Hall Grambe. And I'm going to pin Dr. Hall to the second screen there, and I'll bring you up. There you are. Welcome, Dr. Hall.
Good morning. How's everyone?
Good morning. I'm good.
Hi. Okay. Is this this might be my cue too.
All right. Well, do you have any parting words about your projects, about critical race theory, about how all of that plays into your work?
Me?
Yes.
I mean, I'm just really glad these conversations are happening. I'm glad it's happening in the art world, the theater world, and I appreciate the platform, and everybody should go support Philly Thrive and the Sunrise movement and your, local art scene, local social justice art scene.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, and thanks for bringing your work to educators and to the, not only the local scene, but to make it available for people to use, worldwide, I guess. I don't know that, in English language might make it difficult for it to be used worldwide, but definitely nationwide. And we look forward to seeing that work used out there.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Take care.
Take care. Oh, Dr. Hall's talking to somebody off screen. Good morning, Dr. Hall.
Good morning, sir. Had to give my son some quick instructions. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
So critical race theory is where we got to so far with these topics.
Everybody left.
Everybody left. To be fair,
yeah, I know they did.
To be fair, they warned us. Yeah. I don't know if y'all watched any of the content that's going around social media the past couple of days, but some really funny, really comically funny interactions between certain folks out there. Georgia is having an election soon for governor, and the black Republican running for Georgia's governorship tried and failed miserably to argue against critical race theory last night on Mark Lamont. Is it Mark Lamont Hill?
Yes.
Mark Lamont Hill's broadcast. And Mark Lamont Hill really shut him down in an appropriate way. Mark Lamont Hill is from Philadelphia. He is a journalist here in Philadelphia. He is on the new Black News Network, BNC, and he has a show there. Rep. Vernon Jones came on his show and tried to define critical race theory by pushing it back on Mr. Lamont Hill to define critical race theory. For those that don't know, Mark Lamont Hill is also a PhD in critical race theory. So accusing Mr. Hill of being dumb and not knowing what critical race theory was quite comical to watch.
I'm gonna have to find that so I can look.
I
need a good giggle.
I'll paste the thread here in the chat here and on our social media. But yeah, just to summarize, the conversation goes something like, you're running for governor, as part of your platform for governor, you're saying day one you will bar the teaching of critical race theory in school and bar its use from being used to create policy. How do you define critical race theory? That seems like a reasonable question for somebody who's running on a platform of day one barring the use of critical race theory in policy making.
You have to know what you're getting rid of, right? You have to know what you're barring. Okay. Just want to make sure we understand. Okay, good.
I'm sometimes I get flabbergasted on this show, and I appreciate those audience members willing to stick around through that flabbergastedness. I don't know how to define the thoughts that I am having. I don't quite understand where Rep. Vernon Jones gets the cojones to talk about critical race theory as a negative without even understanding what it is. And so there's a lot of this conversation where people go, okay, well, define critical race theory for me then. No, right? Critical race theory hasn't even entered the conversation at this point. This is a point that I made on in response to somebody else who was trying to unsuccessfully define critical race theory. And I said, no, that's not what critical race theory is. And they said, well, then define critical race theory for me. And my response is no, that is not. We haven't entered the part of the conversation where we know what we're talking about yet. You're just arguing against something because you dislike the words that are strung together. Dr. Hall, you know history pretty well. How often does this happen throughout history, especially with conversations about race?
Let's see. The idea of what is critical. I'm trying to understand what you, as far as your question is concerned.
The idea of a group of people, particularly self-entitled people who are in the majority of population and society, or particularly wealthy society, how often they take a term and create a boogeyman out of it without even defining the term or bothering to argue against the elements of that term.
Do you really want me to? How often do you breathe? You know, people, we have a tendency, and I think this is just a basic human trait. We have a tendency to fear or dislike something that we don't know, that we think or we hence get a sense of or believe is threatening to our status quo, even if it might not be, just because we don't even take the time to investigate it, because, you know, I'm just going to go ahead and be against it because I don't like, as you said, the way the words are strung together. And so a lot of times people don't do investigations. They just decide that it's not something that they want to know, but it's something that they are against. And we have, you know, I often tell my acting students, one of the hardest things for us to do as human beings is to learn how not to judge. And as an artist, you have to really learn how not to judge things at face value. You really have to sit there and kind of be uncomfortable for a little bit until you really understand what's going on, and then you can actually be able to put it into words and into movement or some type of sound or whatever. and be able to look at things and just look at them in their components, in their basic raw components, without saying, oh, that component is wrong and that component is wrong. But as part of our instinct, as part of the human species, we learn to judge things face value because it has often been part of our survival mode. We're walking down the street, we see a dark shadow, we don't know what that dark shadow is. We have to make a judgment call real fast. Do we keep walking on this side of the street, or do we cross the street? Or do we pick up a stick and let's go for it? You know what I'm saying? And decide you have to make that judgment call, because a lot of times, it was about survival in our life. We're not there anymore, or I feel we shouldn't be there anymore, especially when it comes to dealing with other human beings. We should be able just to enjoy people as they are without having to place judgment on it. But for many people, they haven't gotten to that point. Haven't gotten to that point in their thinking. Because once again, it's about survival. It's once again about what are you going to take? What am I going to lose if I allow you or permit you to do this or think this or do this? How am I going to suffer? And so most people can't think outside of themselves. It's very difficult.
It's interesting because part of what you're speaking to, I've always found fascination with. I come from like a marketing / advertising background, family wise. My mom is involved in marketing. A creative director. That's the person that decides how to advertise something, and I grew up with those. Those were the books that were on my coffee table or in my living room bookshelf. Theories and discussions of that kind of aspect of our society, and coming from the lens of a marketer, this tactic is fascinating because it happens so often on one particular side of the political spectrum, and not very often on the other side of the political spectrum, which I don't understand how that happens so frequently. I'm very confused by that, because most artists, feel free to jump in. You don't have to wait for me to finish that.
No, finish your thought, but go ahead.
But most artists, right? Most artists will think through a problem. Most people who are quote unquote liberal are involved in creative thinking, in expansive thought, in things that really do dive deep into the words that we use, the thoughts that we have, why we have them. It's just part of theater and part of the creative process to examine deeply the individual elements of what it is you're saying, because if you don't, it's boring. Like, if you're not examining why it is, if I didn't think about it. One of the photos that I did for a branding image, I put the woman model in front of the guy model on a motorcycle, and I did it for a very particular reason, which was to illustrate the power of the woman in that situation. But if you didn't bother analyzing that and thinking it through in the moment, like you're just not expressing anything. You just have a picture, and they become less powerful. The art becomes less powerful, less interesting.
See, and then a lot of people think that a lot of people who are not artists, I should say, in many ways, or don't have an artistic sense, have and I think this is part of the lack of appreciation for art many people have, is that they think that art is haphazard, that we do things that it is not thought out. Because in many cases, many artists can explain how they do what they do in order to get what they get. You know what I'm saying? To get the end results a lot of times. And I'm one of those. It's like, I'm just putting together all the theories, all the ideas, all the things that I know. And I'm utilizing the tools the practical tools that I've learned in theater. Now, what the outcome of that experiment is going to be, it depends. You know what I'm saying? Upon the show, many different variables, just like any other laboratory, come into factor. But most people think it's haphazard. So they're going to look at your picture, and they're going to the picture of the woman on the motorcycle with the man in the back, and not seeing her being empowered, but seeing him losing power in some shape, form, or fashion, and then wondering, why would somebody do something like this that is so opposed to the norm? You know what I'm saying? And so, I would assume as an artist, you would hope that somebody would take the time to think about it and break it apart and say, oh, he did this because of this. He put her here to empower her. That doesn't lessen him. It just means that she's just the one that's driving. She doesn't lose. Does the woman lose power when she's behind the man? No. Why does he lose power? Because he's behind her. You know what I'm saying? They're both getting there at the same damn time. They're both on the same motorcycle.
Right.
You know what what difference does it make? They're together. She's driving. That kind of stuff. And so most people, and it's like, oh, that's cool. It just gives us a different way of, so it breaks the norm. But hopefully that kind of juxtaposition, and that may not be quite the word I would want to use, but that juxtaposition, that changing of that imagery will get some people to think beyond just the surface. Right. And that's part of the job of art.
Right,
and that's
that
part
is
of the
always
job
the
of
job of art. Yeah, arguably, that's always the job of art, is to make people at least think something. At least
right.
Whether they love it or hate it doesn't matter so much as making them think something. But and then also, to your point, I'm often annoyed and I guess annoyed is the right word. There needs to be a better word for it, but Emily brought up during her interview that they even thought about the color of the socks that they were using, down to like not using white socks. And instantly, the part of my brain that thinks about how other people think about stuff, somebody's gonna latch onto that phrase and be like, that's exactly what I don't want. That's exactly what I don't want in what my kids see and hear. That's exactly, I don't want a bunch of liberals talking to my kids about what color their socks are, because they think it's silly or unimportant.
Cancel culture.
Huh?
You cancel the white socks.
Yeah, cancel culture.
You cancel the white socks. Sorry.
I mean, no, but that's real. Like, that is real. There's a great female artist here in the city of Philadelphia, Lauren Rinaldi. She's a painter. She does excellent work. She does large public works very often, and she's an excellent artist. And she does feminist art. That's her thing. She does very feminist art. Her subjects are all powerful women or images of women's empowerment. And the woman who, and I can never remember her name because this is how little she affects my life, but the woman who argued against safe injection sites here in South Philadelphia, one of the women leading that argument, who are just fronting for a quasi-mob family that is the descendant of the Rizzo administration. But that's
that's another story.
That's another story. Sorry. I mean, I could talk about that for an hour or two. I might do an episode on that. Anyway.
Hey.
But this woman, is commenting repeatedly and at length on Lauren Rinaldi's social media, because Lauren is currently talking on her social media about the DA's race here in Philadelphia. The DA's race is Vega versus Krasner. Krasner is the incumbent. Larry Krasner is a quote-unquote progressive DA. He's done a lot of work to shore up the parts of the DA's office that look at integrity. I believe his post this morning from the Office of Integrity was that 18 people have been freed because of investigations that their office have done into the cases and found negligence on the part of either the police or the DA's office in those cases in presenting either evidence or not sharing evidence with the defense team, etc. So as of this morning, and during his time in office, 18 innocent people have gone free. And there's a famous quote in history about better 1,000 guilty men go free than one innocent man spend one night in prison. You know, that is important. It's important that we honor that concept. Vega is a very law and order, quote unquote. I don't know why we here's branding again. Here's this concept of branding that Vega is running as a Democrat, which he's not. He's running as a Democrat who is a law and order candidate, which he's not. He's not pro law and order. I'm sorry, Mr. Vega, but if you put people in jail who are not guilty of a crime, and you do everything in your power as a prosecutor to put them in jail, including hiding evidence from the defense that they are innocent or that there is evidence that they are possibly innocent, you are not a law and order candidate. You do not support law and order. You support illegal jailing. You support
criminality.
You support people being in a slave society and a group of people being enslaved because they don't look like the juries that you're picking. And we could go on and on about that. I'm sorry, but
but that's okay. This is your platform, baby. I'm just here for the ride.
I mean, no, but like that. So for those who are watching that don't know what critical race theory is, that is the essence of critical race theory, is examining the systems that are in place with a critical lens and truthfully understanding what the aspects of those systems mean with regard to white supremacy or racism in general. And when laws were written, understanding that when laws were written, the environment that they were written in. It's nothing more than that. It's just examining our body of laws and our body of governing and societal structure. To understand, okay, so this law was written when black men were not considered citizens. This law was written when women were not considered citizens. That's the entirety of it. It has nothing to do with teaching kids that white people are bad. It has nothing to do with teaching with saying that, you know, I saw the dumbest ass thing. Some moron decided to put up his projection of what critical race theory is by saying that critical race theory is here to make white people to universally degrade the quality of life of white people until we're all equal. Yeah, I'm just gonna let that sit. I don't mind the dead air here.
Degrade the quality. See, whoever wrote that should look at the words that they strung together. They want to talk about stringing words together. You talk about, what did he say? Degrade the quality of life of white people to everyone else, everybody becomes equal. So what does that say?
I'll directly quote him here because it's on my mentions.
Okay.
The reason d'etre of critical race theory is that any disparities in material/spiritual well-being that exist between ethnic groups is due to the affluent group oppressing the less affluent. No. And if you want to reel back this broadcast.
Hey, read that. Wait, read that shit. I mean, read that to me one more time.
The reason d'etre, the reason for existing, for those that don't speak French, of critical race theory, what the boogeyman that has been created, is that any disparities in material or spiritual well-being that exists between ethnic groups is due to the affluent group oppressing, in quotes, the less affluent. And the only way to achieve equity is to impose restrictions on the affluent. His argument is that critical race theory is a totalitarian idea and leading to a totalitarian state wherein we oppress the affluent and white people in general so that everyone is equal.
I mean, but he's also saying, and if I understand the reason that it exists, one of the reasons that critical race theory was in this quote was created was to examine how one group was being oppressed by another group, and how in order to make society more equal, somebody is being oppressed somewhere in this statement, some way or another. You know what I'm saying? So you already have an affluent group that's influencing a minor group, another group that has no affluence, the poor. And so critical race theory, he's saying, basically allows one to, if I understand this quote correct, he may, but I'm trying to put a positive spin on this, but that allows us to look at the structures and that has created this affluent group and that has demonized and demonetized the other group, if I'm understanding that quote correctly.
No,
that's what
I mean. His whole argument started with a previous post that if you want a glimpse of what America would be like if it were governed by critical race theory cultists, read about Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge. So he's comparing critical race theory, people who examine critical race theory. And by the way, this is an examination. Critical race theory is about examining. It isn't about imposing anything.
Right.
He's comparing the people who examine the society that we live in through a lens of accurate historical fact. He's comparing those people to the Khmer Rouge.
Yeah. And in that first quote, but in his second quote, he says the reason that critical race theory exists, okay, if we take it out of the French, is to examine and explore and dismantle white wealth or wealth in general and distribute it amongst everyone.
Right.
That's basically what.
But his phraseology is to impose. Yeah,
that impose part. So he adds the word impose to show some form of domination. It's not that's not it. But the idea of critical race theory is to examine how these structures came to be and to look at them through the lens of race. And it's like, how does
not even look at them through the lens of race. That's where I'll disagree with you. I don't think
Okay.
it's about looking at them through the lens of race. It's looking at them through the lens of white supremacy existing. Like, that's all. Like,
Mhm.
the only part of critical race theory, and this is why so many people are up in arms, what the reality of why so many people are up in arms about critical race theory is because to examine history through the lens of the actual existence of white supremacy acknowledges that white supremacy existed at some point in history and that there are policies that exist
Right.
only because of white supremacy.
So when I use the term race, I don't deduct white people from that term. There are white Crayolas in my Crayola box.
Mm-hmm.
I like white as a color,
Mm-hmm.
as an artist. So they invented the whole term of race.
Yep.
They invented this game of race that we play. And they love to say people of color play the race card all the time. Bitch, you created the deck, you created the card, thus you created the card, you created white supremacy.
Yep.
So that is the ace. Those are the jokers.
Yep.
White supremacy is the joker in this game, this race game that we play. So to me, it is inherent. So we examine it through the lens. And when I say we examine it through the lens of race, we examine it through that lens of race creation and who created it. It's created for white supremacy. It's created through that lens. So white is part of that when I utilize the term of race.
I just wanted to clarify it because
I wanted to clarify too. Okay.
This is where a lot of people get derailed. And a lot of people get moved off of the actual argument onto these side arguments of quote unquote reverse racism or, black supremacy or anything like that. People start when we as people who understand inherently that there are laws, there are systems in place that do affect to this day people of color, that those systems were created to support and endear an entire group to power. We understand that intrinsically, but as people who understand that intrinsically, it's easy for us to say we're examining these systems through the lens of race, but then people go, oh, that makes you a racist. You believe in race then? No. I mean, and if you and people can go back and watch previous versions of this show, previous episodes of this show, and I'm sure examine things that you've written, examine things that I've written, and they'll find that when we talk about race, we're talking about the construct, but people get confused between the construct and the belief. That's why I wanted to be clear on that. And it ties into something that's going on right now, which is vaccine hesitancy. So vaccine hesitancy, we when journalists, when political scientists, when people in general study the society that we live in, we have to acknowledge that race as a construct exists. Mm-hmm. And so people often again get lost in this little like side argument of, well, if you're acknowledging that race exists, no, we're not acknowledging that race is an actual thing, because it's not. Otherwise, I wouldn't exist. I'm multi-ethnic. I come from so many different backgrounds. I am like I'm a person. But growing up, I was treated as a black person. I grew up in the South. I had black hair. I tan really dark. I was called an N-word more times than I can count. I was threatened with guns. I was threatened with being shot. My mom was threatened on the highway. Like our car was shot at by some idiot racist with a shotgun in a pickup truck, and we were chased all the way home. You know, because I am a black man, but I am only a black man in the society that race exists. So anyway, sorry, on we long topic there, but you know, vaccine hesitancy, we're studying this based on ethnic racial lines, racial divides, and political divides too. And oddly, political divides have become even more race specific, because I don't know. I guess because when white men get backed into a corner, they just all huddle together.
Well, I was gonna say along the lines, speaking of vaccine hesitancy, you know, I haven't gotten the shot yet. Part of it is a hesitant. I am hesitant, not so much for many of the reasons, probably people, medical reasons and stuff like that, and so I'm being somewhat cautious. And I really don't have to go anywhere, so I'm not really inclined to be around a lot of people as of yet. But as things start to open and the itch to get out starts, you know, I'm thinking about it more and more. But I will say, historically, and looking at it within the context, the construct of race, you know, people of color are often weary of new things like that, you know, of drugs like that, because, you know, whether it was a blanket or it was a needle full of syphilis, somebody didn't jack us up, didn't jack people of color up at one point or another in the history of this. We've been the experimental lab rats. And since the beginning.
And that was a discussion early on in the vaccine development process. Several African countries were offered 100% vaccination for free from China, from Europe, from America, and they said, no, we're not going to be the lab rats for the rest of the world.
And it's funny, we were just talking about this yesterday. And why should they? Their levels of COVID are nowhere near any other place in the country. Africa is one of the few continents that never had the outbreaks that you saw throughout the rest of the world.
Exactly.
I mean, in some places, they only had 1 or 2 people die of COVID, if they caught it at all. You had some nations that never saw it. People go, COVID, what? When you talk to people, I mean, I have friends in Africa and stuff like that, and they're like, COVID, what? They don't know what that is. They haven't been shut down. So why do you want to come over here and test something that we don't even have on us, when you need to be testing it on other people where they are suffering and we're not suffering here? So that was, you know, those of us who were watching that were very suspicious of that. Why are you doing that? They don't have the numbers. They're not showing any signs of that. But historically, it has been the place to go and test all your fun drugs on. Let's see what happens to the black folks.
Yep. And then, but in the interim, vaccine hesitancy has completely flopped. Now you have the same folks who are anti-mask and pro opening up and pro quote unquote natural herd immunity, arguing against getting the vaccine in any sort of way. And you have the folks.
You knew that shit was coming. You knew that shit was coming. Okay. Right. Just want to make sure
I knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. Everybody knew it was coming. You know, the question was, you know, how fast could we get the vaccine out there before people were dumb? But also now you have the United States and the EU arguing patent protections, international patent protections, to keep vaccines from the rest of the world, from these countries that they were going to test vaccines in for free. You know, so what, we're not valuable as people unless we're providing medical research, you know. Yeah, I know, yes, but
Short
at
answer.
any rate, so, you know, but you know, the in the United States, the vaccine hesitancy is almost non-existent in the Black community anymore, which is good. I'm glad. I'm very glad that will bring our population numbers into the majority amongst people of color versus white people very much faster than the what is it, 2045 or something like that. It's predicted to go 5150. You know, so yeah, go ahead and stay out there and unvaccinated and die. I don't care.
No, I'm not gonna. I don't agree. I'm not gonna say that. But I did like. I know that many of us are getting. Many people of color, Black people and people of color, are getting the vaccine, and I think that's good. I'm going to get mine. I'm getting my mind right. I'm getting my mind right and making sure.
I'm going for my second shot today, so you know.
Good for you. Good for you. You know, but both of them more like I have issues with blood thinners, so both of them have warnings. So I'm watching carefully. I'm thinking by the end of the month I'll be good to go. I will have psyched myself up enough to go.
I would go to one of the ones that has the Pfizer. You know, just personally.
Definitely. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to get it, and I hope those who are aiming towards pure herd immunity, I hope they get their herd. But otherwise, me and mine are getting our shot, so we can make sure we're vaccinated.
I mean, we're talking, and I realize it's 11 a.m. And
that's okay.
I'm
almost out of school.
Also wanted to bring into, so you know, just for our audience, thank you for tuning in for the last hour. We're gonna continue the discussion a little bit about vaccines, vaccine hesitancy, masked public events as we go into the 11 o'clock hour here. I'm an independent journalist, and this is an independent media station, so I can stay on and talk to you all as long as you want me to, or as long as I want to. And thank you to Dr. Ardencia Hall-Karambe for joining us. Thank you to Julie Beth and Emily Schuman for joining us. And check out our comments on our social media for links to their work. So at any rate, that's another interesting thing. We're having a lot of public arguments and public debate around reopening schools. And Dr. Hall teaches school, and Dr. Hall was super excited because school is relatively over right now for her school. I think that's good timing. I hope you don't have to teach any in-person classes until after you're fully vaccinated. Yeah,
I should be. And my institution, I will say, has been very good. They have spots for us specifically that we can go to, and they will, you know, much smaller than the Coliseum, because I wasn't real thrilled about going down to, not Coliseum, to the convention center and Center City. So I wanted some place a little bit smaller. So my institution has, you know, set up some places where we can go and get our vaccine and do it and be done. And so that excites me. And I'm excited for the summer, because I think everybody and their dog is going to be busting out at the seams, because the weather's already promising to be wonderful this summer, and I think we all need it. But I will tell everybody, wear your mask, even if you are fully vaccinated. Wear your mask, and if you're going to be in a place that has a lot of people, double mask. Don't be afraid to double mask, and that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be interesting as we go forward, because I think more companies are going to require employees to get the vaccine. I think you're going to have a vaccine card to be able to get on a plane. I think you're going to be able to have to show that you have been vaccinated to get into large venue events. And so,
And I think you're going to have to wear a mask to get into large venue events and crowded events, because regardless of your vaccine card, regardless of your vaccine status, you can still catch it and pass it on to people. Right. It's only like a 6% chance, but who wants to risk 6% chance of killing somebody? Not me, for one. I don't know. Maybe I just care about people a little more.
Maybe a little bit too much. No, I'm just playing. But I think I understand to a certain extent. I don't like wearing the mask. You know what I'm saying? I don't like breathing on myself, and it's me breathing on myself. So I understand why people don't want to wear it, but you have to think about, it's not just about you. And that's, once again, this goes into that whole notion of people being able to think outside of them, beyond themselves, to think beyond what is just good for them and theirs. But, what's good, not just for you, how is it going to benefit not just you, but somebody else, and benefit somebody else after that. But yeah, that's one of the reasons this debate goes on.
I think so. I think my big issue with school reopenings is that inability to think through the problem, or that I don't know that my wife often says I overcredit people with an ability to think through a problem, but I don't know that I don't want to be the kind of person that thinks people are dumb. So I often want to credit people with the ability to think through a problem. So, I don't know.
So, and they just don't?
And they just don't. I don't know whether that's.
So they're lazy?
Yeah. Is that lack of
interest? They're dumb or lazy.
Right. Right. Is it lack of interest? Is it lack of ability? Is it lack of wanting to take the time to think through the problem? I don't know.
I think it's because I think some people have problems connecting dots. As the saying goes, common sense isn't common.
So let me connect the dots then. Let me connect the dots then, because this isn't a huge broadcast, but maybe somebody will want to quote somebody connecting the dots. Here's the dots. There is a pandemic. Hundreds of thousands of people are dying per day worldwide. There are still thousands of people dying per day in the US. That's the dot. They're dead. They're dying. There's a lot of them. Next dot is they're dying of a preventable disease. That disease is preventable by wearing a mask and by washing your hands and by not exposing yourself and your breath and your inhale to somebody who has the disease, or even the air around them, because it is an airborne virus. Dot number 2. Dot number 3, your kids can catch this fucking virus. Okay? So, disease killing hundreds of thousands of people, prevention, kids. And you have people interrupting school board meetings with masks are child abuse. You have people arguing that children should just be tossed back into school right now without any sort of preventative measure, because
any type of mitigation,
because they're not susceptible to it. They are. They catch this disease. They don't die as frequently as adults, but they catch the disease and they spread it.
Can you see COVID? Oh, it's a kid. I'm going to skip that one. Let's go over here to the big one.
Right,
yes.
Right. There's no
We're gonna get the
biological
adult.
difference between your kid and you that would prevent them from catching the disease. Your kid's gonna catch the disease, and I hear these parents in past years all the time arguing about how schools are cesspools of disease. They're giant petri dishes. All one kid comes in sick, all of them get sick. Blah 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 blah. I'm so tired of catching my kids colds. I'm so tired of them going to school and bringing a cold home. This is worse than a cold, people. Don't.
This is a cold and a flu's big brother.
Right. That can kill you.
And that can kill you. Okay, this is cold and flu's big brother. Yeah.
So you don't, even if you're vaccinated and your kid gets this disease, they bring it home, you have a risk of catching that disease, which is much greater than 0. Past that, you have a risk of passing that disease on to people you meet. Your kids have a risk of passing that disease on to people they meet. And every person who catches this disease has that disease in them for long enough for multiple generations of that disease to be born and die. And just like humans, just like animals, viruses change physically and in the way that they work across generations. The reason why we have most of the vaccines that we have is because we're able to propagate generations of bacteria and viruses very quickly because they grow and die and grow again very quickly. So every person that catches the disease is another chance for that vaccine to develop some difference in their exterior form, which is all that these vaccines, that the vaccines out there work on right now. All the virus. You
said the virus.
Yeah.
You said that the virus out. You said the vaccine when I think you meant the virus, and now you're talking about the vaccine.
Yeah. So all the vaccines that are out there, they tell your body what to look for. It's like giving a soldier an illustration of what the enemy looks like. Here's the enemy. That's all this vaccine does. This vaccine goes to your body and goes, here's the enemy. This is what you're looking for. Now, if you see this, attack. Well, your body doesn't know that the vaccine or that the virus changed shape. If the virus changes shape even a little bit, that vaccine is useless. And that's the problem with having kids in school. Like, you're creating a literal petri dish. I don't get it. I don't get it.
People aren't taking into account mutation, and I understand that to a certain extent the vaccine works on certain mutations. We know that it works on the Australian version, the British version, and I believe there was another Taiwanese version. It works on those mutations because they were happening in the process during the time that these drugs were being developed. So the scientists were able to shape them to fit those mutations of the disease. But the disease mutates, as you said, when it gets into a new host. It changes, and then that host passes that new mutation on, and then whether or not that mutation survives depends on how often it can be passed on, and it becomes another strain of that disease. The basic biology and chemistry that goes along with some of the science that we're talking about, most people don't get.
I guess.
And I think that's.
But
that's also part of the problem is that, and I'm not saying that everybody has to be college educated, but not everybody sitting in that biology class in high school and learning these things and understanding how viruses work.
I mean,
and
I
that
didn't go to college. I mean, I went to 2 years of college.
but you read.
I read magazines occasionally. I'm not some like genius.
You were sitting, but I didn't say you was a genius. No, it didn't cross my lips. But you sat in your mama's house and you read those books.
Yeah.
You understand enough of theory, and I can say to a certain extent, theory is theory is theory. You understand enough of the principles of theory itself to be able to take what they're saying and be able to put them through some type of educated lens to come out with some meaning that you can, you know what I'm saying? Most people don't go through that critical thought. They're not going through the critical thought as they're listening to these things. And then they don't have the tools necessary to be able to be able to find the right answer for themselves. So they rely on what they know, that it is a virus. Well, a cold is a virus. Everybody gets a cold. Well, a cold is a very mild virus. A flu is a little stronger virus, and this is a killer virus. And so, and people have to think about them in those measures. And it's something that can always come back because it's a virus. It will always come back. We will have seasons of it. It's not going to dissipate in the sense that it's ever going to go away, but it is going to be mitigated tremendously.
Well, I mean, like,
to where
polio was a virus
right, exactly.
too, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. In some places.
In most places, I think.
In most places.
Yeah, I
but
think
some people still have to get that polio shot.
Yeah.
There's some places where you still have to get that shot to prevent it from happening.
What's the one with the iron lung that we don't even have iron lungs anymore?
Tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis barely exists anymore. It still exists, but it's very much.
They're very rare,
Yeah.
and you know, and so I remember having to get my polio shot. That's just how old I am, and so being able to get that shot has helped eradicate those diseases where we don't see them as much, and so. I think that is the goal of scientists and doctors as we go through this process with COVID. But we have to still get enough people vaccinated. We still have to get enough people in order to develop herd immunity where we could say, oh, we only hear about it every once in a while. We have to get it every year. You had to go I remember as a kid having to go get our shots for school, and that included polio and measles and rubella and mumps and all the rest of that stuff that was reoccurring.
Yeah, I'm of the generation that only had the TB and measles, mumps, rubella vaccines.
I'll take your thank you.
Thank you. No, seriously, like that. I'm
you're welcome.
I'm so glad that the generations before us weren't this weird about stuff. I mean, the generation you're talking about was the generation with the syphilis experiments. You know, it was the generation that was drastically affected by what would now be jailable offenses against groups of people, if not, you know, nearly. I don't know if the international court does death penalty after the trials of the Nazis, but you know that they're genocidal. That was genocidal research. You know. Anyway, and that generation still was able to get vaccinated, and I don't know that part of history well enough. I think that's to our detriment. We don't. People are always talking about, don't take statues down because we'll lose track of our history. There's so much of our history we've lost track of. Some statue in Charleston ain't gonna help me learn history. You know, I don't care what it's a statue of. Anyway, there's so many pieces of history that this is a perfect example. It's recent history, and I don't know it any better than I know, you know, the history of my African ancestors. You know, I barely know anything about it.
Are you talking specifically about the Tuskegee experiment? And
no, I mean, I know well, okay, so I know the Tuskegee experiment happened. I know in general what it was. Which was, for those that don't know, literally giving syphilis to black soldiers as an experiment to see how the disease developed. Yeah.
Let it run its full course.
Yep, literally that was it. That was the whole point of the experiment. Give these otherwise healthy, able-bodied men a disease, a crippling disease, to see what the course of the disease is, because there weren't apparently enough medical histories of people who had this disease.
And trying to discover how to cure the disease, you got to give it to somebody. Yep. And those soldiers in some cases gave it to their wives. You know what I'm saying? And it was just a devastating thing to the family, and to once again making African Americans and suspicious of the government when it comes to giving shots. We don't know what's in that needle. It's really interesting as you were talking. I don't know about you. I'm into the Marvel universe. Leave me alone.
I love Marvel universe.
And I don't know if you've been watching, you know, Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Have not yet.
Oh, then I won't say nothing.
No, say it. I don't mind.
No, I'm a hope. Man, you need to, because what we're talking about is, I mean, there's the episode you discover in the show that Steve, Captain America was not the first, that they experimented on black soldiers first. They literally, so the writers literally take this Tuskegee experiment and pull it into this, but they're using the serum that made Steve Captain America, Steve Rogers. And so, I can't remember this. Falcon goes into, and he meets there's only one black soldier left. The other ones either died from the shot, terrible deaths, or they end up having to be killed. And when he was the only one that survived and was able to take that shot, and they ended up putting him in jail, and then they gave it to Steve Rogers and made him Captain America. That's so you discover that part of that becomes part of that history. And it's really interesting how that, I love the way that they have weaved in parts of that's what makes it, you know, believable, weaving in those aspects of truth into the story, and hopefully making people go and look at this history that they hadn't looked at. Just
there you go, talking about putting art, you know, putting into art intentional things, you know, and a lot of people will just, and so, you know, you mentioned love in the Marvel universe. I love all of sci-fi, and whether that's superhero sci-fi or any sort of sci-fi, I love all of sci-fi because it is always and has always been very intentional, from the first woman who ever wrote a sci-fi story to now, is always been very intentional about talking about science and society and framing the current thoughts and troubles of society in this remote story, so that you can analyze these thoughts without being in them. It's moving your analysis. So this is something that people like me, like you, like other artists, like philosophers do all the time, and sci-fi just gives an easy window for people who don't try to be philosophers, a way of doing this, which is, Sci-fi takes your concept, critical race theory, and then puts it in a time and place far, far away, whether it's the past or the future or some system that doesn't exist, and it lets you think about it without being involved in it. So, you know,
that's the whole nature of, I mean, you look theater, you know what I'm saying? That's the whole nature
Right.
of theater and art. That's what we do.
Right.
How can we look at what we're going through now through a different place, through a long ago, far away, futuristic, you know, frame that makes it easier and palpable for the audience to accept some of these concepts. And when you look at, you know, something like Star Trek, the original series, when it first came on, the revolution that it caused, because you had such a diverse crew on that ship. People were like, wait a second, well, okay, we can kind of accept it because it was in the future. And so this is a utopia that we're all aiming for. So it's okay, even though I may go out and pick it later against Black folks. But right now I'm gonna watch Star Trek. And hopefully through watching that, people learn to break down, whether they did it consciously or not, some of their prejudice when it came to other people. And that's one of the beauties, I think, of just art in general. It allows us to look at our Weltanschauung. Our Weltanschauung cannot be, which means worldview in German, cannot be so solidified to where other concepts and ideas can't come in, or we become stifled. I like to say we become like the dinosaurs. You become very limited and your time here is very short. Because if you can't move with the punches and roll with the tides, you go be a dinosaur. Okay. And so you have to allow your Weltanschauung, your worldview, to expand and take in new things, so that you're always learning and processing, and so you can deal and live in the world that you are in, rather than trying to constrict and fighting against the movement of the tide of just humanity and life itself. And that, because that often leads to extinction.
And just to again connect the dots for everybody, Star Trek, the original series, I just had to look this up. The pilot episode was shot in November of 1964. So put that in historical context. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot 4 years later, in April of 1968. So the race move, the equality movement had already started, and was at its height in 64. The Cold War was already started in 64. When was the Cuban Missile Crisis?
63.
Yep, 62. So
62, okay.
So the Cuban Missile Crisis had happened 2 years earlier. So Russia, the character of Chekhov, embodied Russia. You had Japan, which we had just won World War II. There was still a lot of anti-Asian hate. Sitting right there, 1 and 2, on the screen in front of the American Captain Kirk. Sitting 1 and 2, you had
driving the bus. Driving the bus. Okay.
You had a complete literal alien, embodied in Spock. You had Scottish. You had a black woman who was originally
the communicator.
Right, and she was originally scheduled, like in this original Bible of the series, she was supposed to be the first officer. And and talk about systemic racism. This is critical race theory. The executives at CBS said, no, we cannot have a black woman first officer Our audience will not accept that. That is critical race theory. Examining the reason why Uhura did not become first officer of Star Trek the original series is critical race theory. Having
the reasons why they chose not to, yeah, is based on critical race theory. They looked at the race and of their constituents, of the people who are watching that television at that time, and they said they're not going to deal with that. So we got to change this, because they were looking at it through the lens of critical race theory. Yes, but go ahead.
And teaching critical race theory amounts to only saying, this is why. This is the actual historical reason why we have written documentation that the executives made this decision based on race. That's critical race theory. That is teaching critical race theory. You don't want your kids exposed to the fact that in November of 1964, it was impossible for an executive team at a major broadcast network to accept the fact that a black woman could be first officer of a starship set 400 years into the future. You can't your kids can't be exposed to that. That's something that you think is, I know I'm just arguing with the screen here, but
yeah, but I mean, when you think about it, it's like, it just sounds really, that's how closed-minded people are. Even in the future, their Weltanschauung is so tight and so narrow that they cannot see past their own existence, past themselves. You know what I'm saying? So even in the future, it's still gonna be just like this. Bitch, we hoping that shit die out with you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But okay, but the big business is gonna placate to their audience. And so they made her the communicator, which I think is really interesting. And that she becomes the one who can interpret and understand all the freaking languages that everybody is talking. She's the one who, I think about some of my favorite episodes of Uhura, and she's through her critical thinking and her use of communication, she gets them out of a lot of crap at times. So her in that position, I think, becomes vital. I love the story of, that was the first interracial kiss on national television, was on Star Trek, once again pushing that envelope, and in ways that, because Gene Roddenberry, I think in his own way, he was a critical thinker, and he definitely, as you pointed out, to everything that was happening during this time period as he created this series, was very much so looking at what was happening at his society. He was a critical race thinker, and how can I bring my society back together? And he saw Star Trek as the ultimate way to do that.
Sci-fi is always a vehicle for,
indeed,
ethnic, for examining society, whether it be based on ethnicity or as in the case of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, be based in the ideas of anti-intellectualism and anti-forward thinking, anti-development. There's other words to use for anti-development, like conservatism, but again, the marketing, there's this marketing that for some reason we just don't do, and I think it's, I don't want to be mean about it, and this isn't trying to be disparaging, but I think it's because people who think progressively, try to think progressively, try to think inclusively, actually examine these things as real issues and try to think about them in terms of real problems. And the people who are unwilling to examine them try to play them off as made up concepts. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I literally in the past 24 hours have seen somebody who honestly said that white supremacy doesn't exist, and honestly asked for a list of white supremacists. And anybody know a list of white supremacists? I mean, yeah. Does anybody his comment was that white supremacy doesn't exist, and can you point to anyone, can you list anyone who is a self-proclaimed white supremacist? Well, yes.
Oh, David Duke.
Well, yeah, and he said David Duke isn't even a white supremacist anymore, which David Duke has said he's not a white supremacist anymore, but that's branding, you know.
Yeah. David Duke he now wears a suit too. He didn't used to do that either. I remember him as a kid. He wasn't wearing a suit.
No.
He was he was out there in the mountains doing his thing, and yeah, white supremacy just took a bath.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. But I gotta go. I need to get back to doing some work. It's been a pleasure, sir.
It's been
As
a pleasure
always,
talking to you as well. I really appreciate it.
No problem. I enjoy being here on Wednesdays. And now that summer is here, I can be here on Wednesday.
Awesome. I'm gonna be taking a break in a couple of weeks, unfortunately, just for parental leave. But yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a 6-week break, beginning of June. But yeah, but we'll be on for the next couple of weeks, through the first week of June. So we look forward to having you for the next 4 weeks. I love having conversations with you. You bring a wealth of knowledge and always enjoyable and deep conversation.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. And the same here. I enjoy talking to you and just flipping things back and forth. We have very similar thoughts, you know. I will say this as we get ready to close for the day to everybody. Spend some time thinking of people outside of yourself. Think of someone outside of yourself today.
Definitely.
Have a good one.
I do that, and I think that's important. Even if you don't agree with it, especially if you don't agree with it, try and figure out why it is that somebody would say what they're saying. I mean, I know why people say things like there are no white supremacists anymore. It's because they don't want to acknowledge the hatred that pure chance has put them in the lineage of. They don't want to be seen as bad. Everybody is the hero of their own story. It's something I've said before. But
and listening to Tim Scott doesn't help either. Man, somebody finna get me, but coons go do what coons do. So
yeah,
okay.
I mean, we got them coming out of the woodwork lately. We got Tim Scott. We got what's his name that we just talked about.
Yeah, the one running for governor.
We got the constant of Candace Owens. I'm sorry, Candace, you are not invited to the barbecue.
Ever. Again. Again.
No, you can't even bring the dead. Sorry, no. Not even the plates. Don't bring the plates. I'd be worried about what's on them.
Are we even telling her when the time and day?
No. But sometimes she finds out. I just want to make sure. You know. I just want to make sure. Some people find out.
And then you've been there too when that person finds out and they walk in the room, everybody
goes. It gets quiet.
Let's go in the kitchen. Let's go in the kitchen. Come on, let's go in the kitchen. I thought she said she won't go be here today. What?
She was supposed to be working.
Child. That cousin that you got. Yeah. Okay, cuz. Yeah, gotcha.
All right. Love talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. See you next week, darling.
See you next week. And thank you to all of my guests. Again, thank you to Julie Beth and Emily Schuman, curious, think outside the pipeline is their film. And that was just me waving to Dr. Hall. Thank you, Dr. Ardencia Hall Karambe, for joining us in this lively conversation. Please tune in next week. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, take a stab at subscribing to us, being a patron on Patreon, patreon.com/lightbeefproductions. Subscribe to our Facebook, facebook.com/lightbeefproductions. Subscribe to our Twitter, lightbeefprod on Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/lightbeefproductions. And if you support us if you like what you see, support us on Patreon. We have patron levels as little as $1 a month, and you can, get up-to-date information on other projects that we're working on. You'll get behind-the-scenes information about those projects and be more involved with what's going on in the Light Beef Productions world. And so tune in next week. We'll have more guests for you. We'll have more news and current information to give you. Thanks so much for watching, and have a good week until we return.